Got a bit of a cold today, so apologies in advance if I sound like crap. Hey guys, Brad from Drathrorol Games here, and welcome to another episode of Errata-Garasu. Errata-Garasu is a show where we take 5 cards that are currently on the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG ban list, and we give them hypothetical erratas so that they can hypothetically come back into the game. If this is your first time here, I highly recommend checking out our previous episodes. Link to a playlist containing all of the episodes will be on the end screen as well as in the description. This week we will be covering all of the jar and pot cards on the list with the exception of Pot of Greed. If you want to know what I did for Pot of Greed, check out last week's episode. So with all that out of the way, let's get started. Our first card for this week's episode is Morphing Jar number 2. Morphing Jar number 2 is a level 3 Earth Rock Flip Effect monster with 800 attack points and 700 defense points, and its effect reads as follows. Flip. Shuffle all monsters on the field into the deck. Then, each player excavates cards from the top of their deck until they excavate the same number of monsters they shuffled into their main deck. Special summon all excavated level 4 or lower monsters in face-down defense position. Also, send the remaining cards to the graveyard. So, honestly, this can just come back as is. I mean, it's not too crazy by today's standards, and it's at 3 in the OCG. So, honestly, there's nothing I'd need to do for this one. It's fine. Well, that was easy. Moving on to our next card, we have Cyberjar. Cyberjar is a level 3 Dark Rock Flip Effect monster with 900 attack points and 900 defense points, and its effect reads as follows. Flip. Destroy all monsters on the field. Then both players reveal the top 5 cards from their decks. Then special summon all revealed level 4 or lower monsters in face-up attack position or face-down defense position. Also, add any remaining cards to their hand. If either player has less than 5 cards in their deck, reveal as many as possible. So honestly, the reason why this card is banned has absolutely nothing to do with its destruction effect, because honestly, we have plenty of mass board removal destruction, and like it's all fine. No one really plays it because, you know, evenly matched power crept everything. So I mean, we have Regeki at 1, we have Dark Hole at 1, Interrupted Kaiju Slumber is unlimited, and no one really plays any of those except Slumber if they're running a Kaiju engine. So, yeah, no one really plays mass destruction stuff anymore. The thing that is most likely keeping this card banned, other than Konami dragging their feet, is honestly its recursion effect. I mean, the fact that you, after it's destroyed, you just essentially draw 5 cards and special summon all the level 4 or lower monsters, it's pretty broken. So, I mean, it's just like an immediate +5 for both players. I mean, after the destruction effect takes place. But anyway, so what we gotta do here is minimize the recursion. So here's the errata that I gave it. Flip. Destroy all monsters on the field. Then both players excavate cards from the top of their decks equal to the number of monsters they controlled that were destroyed by this effect. Then special summon all excavated level 4 or lower monsters in face-up attack position or face-down defense position. Also add any remaining cards to their hand. If either player has less than 5 cards in their deck, excavate as many as possible. So with this, it's not a guaranteed 5. Basically, all you get is equivalent to the number of monsters that you controlled when this card destroyed everything. So, if you just set this thing and pass, and then your opponent builds their board and goes off and then just attacks into your Cyberjar, they get all their stuff recurred. You only get 1 card because of the Cyberjar that got destroyed. So, yeah, I feel like as long as the amount of cards that you draw is equivalent to the amount of monsters that were destroyed that you controlled, I think this is fair. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Our next card is probably the most crazy card on this list, Fiber Jar. Fiber Jar is a level 3 Earth Plant flip effect monster with 500 attack points and 500 defense points, and its effect reads as follows. Flip. Each player shuffles all cards from their hand, field, and graveyard into the deck, then draws 5 cards. Let's just reset the game. You're just about to lose, and then you set this, and the game just gets instantly reset. Sure, life points they don't change, so they don't matter as much. But like, I mean, you just reset the game. So, it's crazy. So originally, my thought was I just double down on the game reset so that, the life points reset too, and you also shuffle in the banished zone. But I figured that's probably not a great idea, just doubling down on the game reset sort of deal. I did give it a once per match clause, though. Forget the once per turn, forget the once per duel. We've invented once per match here. So, but I decided not to double down on the whole game reset thing, even if it is a once per match sort of deal. So, here's the errata that I gave it instead. Flip. Each player shuffles all cards from their hand, field, and graveyard into the deck, then draws 5 cards. At the start of your second standby phase after this card's effect has resolved, you lose the duel. You can only activate the effect of Fiber Jar once per match. So we still got that once per match clause that, I invented just for this card. But anyway, so here's the deal. If you activate this thing, you only have 1 or 2 turns to end the game before this thing kills you. So let's say you just set it and pass, and your opponent, has like this massive board that they've accumulated, and they attack into this thing, and everything gets reset other than life points. You have 1 turn. 1 turn to win the game before this thing will kill you. And then if you somehow activate it on your turn, then you've got 2 turns. But still, all the same, you don't have very long after the game resets to just, you have to flat out win, or you just, this card just ends you. That's all there is to it. So, that's what I figured would be the best way to balance this thing, but again, let me know in the comments what you guys think. I'm pretty happy with this. But anyway, let's move on to the next card. Our next card is Pot of Avarice. Pot of Avarice is a normal spell card with the following effect. Target 5 monsters in your graveyard. Shuffle all 5 into the deck, then draw 2 cards. So the OCG has this at 3, and the OCG has never had this card banned, in all honesty. When this card was banned in the TCG, that's when, the TCG and the OCG split in terms of their ban lists, other than Cyberstein, that emergency Cyberstein ban. But anyway, so honestly, it's not all that crazy by today's standards. I mean, oh wait, dangers are a thing. We have dangers. The OCG doesn't. So what? So we need to give this thing an errata anyway, because the TCG was stupid enough to make dangers. Why did they make dangers? So what did I do to errata this? Target 5 monsters with different names in your graveyard. Shuffle all 5 into the deck. Then draw 2 cards. You cannot draw any cards by card effects during the turn that you activate this card, except by this card's effect. You can only activate 1 Pot of Avarice per turn. So I gave it a hard once per turn. You can't draw any other cards by card effects other than through this card, and you have to target 5 cards with different names. So that's the best I could do for this thing. I mean, you definitely can't run this in dangers, and, for everything else that just completely pops off and accumulates a bunch of stuff in the graveyard, and can actually activate this on their first turn. You know, I figure you have to target 5 with different names might be enough to slow that down. I don't know. But anyway, let me know what you guys think. Let's just move on to the last one. Our final card is That Grass Looks Greener. Now, while this card isn't a pot or jar card, it does have the Goblin of Greed in its artwork, so... Association? Oh, I needed a 5th card. But what does it do? That Grass Looks Greener is a normal spell card with the following effect. If you have more cards in your deck than your opponent, send cards from the top of your deck to the graveyard so that you have the same number of cards in the deck as your opponent. So... basically, you run a 60-card deck with nothing but graveyard recursion effects or things that want to get milled or things that allow you to really set up when you mill. And, you know, your opponent is most likely going to run a 40-card deck, maybe a handful more cards than 40, but generally they're running a 40-card deck, and you just mill like 20 cards. And, I mean, there isn't really anything your opponent can do about it. So, you just dump a bunch of cards in the graveyard, all their stuff gets recurred, and all their effects go off. So, that's why it's banned here in the TCG. But in the OCG, it's actually at 2. So, it might not be all that crazy, especially with, I do feel like it has been a little power creeped by our standards here in the TCG. So maybe it could come back to 1, maybe 2, but if I absolutely had to give it an errata, here's what I would do. At the start of your main phase 1, if you have more cards in your deck than your opponent does, send cards from the top of your deck to the graveyard so that you have the same number of cards in your deck as your opponent. You cannot activate the effects of cards in the graveyard during the turn you activate this card. So you get your massive graveyard dump, but you can't activate any of their effects. Problem solved. Yeah, it makes this card suck. But there wasn't really anything else that could be done. And with that, we conclude this week's episode of Errata-Garasu. Join us next week when I try not to have a mental breakdown at the difficulty of the cards for next week's theme. I thought last week was difficult. No. This next week. No. So like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and check out the rest of the series if you haven't already. But with all that being said, I will catch you guys next time. Bye!